Well, I'm going to dive into my stuff, and there's so few of us that I really am open to questions, and you can throw them into the text or the chat function if you want. And just make this, or even this is the third. And so I put the link into our webpage. It's also that scan code on the front there. Are my slides going to change? Supposed to. There we go. We got some more people coming on. Oh, there we go. All right. So I am the director of the Adolescent Intensive Program at the Anxiety Center at Renew Counseling, and we deal with, young people in challenging places across the boards. And so we literally as a team think about how do we increase willingness in those first week or two. And so one of the reasons I dove into this and have made my interns read the whole book that we're using is to just increase our ability to help a young person move forward. The Anxiety Center also has an adult program, so we cover from 12 to 99 or whatever, whenever somebody might want to come in there dealing with anxiety. And adolescent program actually thinks anxiety and depression. So I'm going to jump back in. This is one I've said a couple times, but again, the primary goal of MI, or motivational interviewing, is to elicit and support a person's motivation for change. So it is kind of coming from a place of not assuming they want to change, or that as a person, I can make somebody change. So rather than imposing those external pressures, and as a therapist or wherever you work, you get those from parents, you get those from others. MI, motivational interviewing, is empowering individuals to identify and vocalize their reasons for making a positive change in their life. I think one of the most interesting things, and I kind of knew this, but that the literature will show, is that with adults, the literature says they need to actually be doing change talk. And today's theme is change talk, and giving you things they're going to do in that change talk before you can be convinced they're moving towards change. With teenagers, it's actually when you see a decrease in their counter change talk. So when they quit talking about the other things, and even if they're not talking about change yet, you actually have a positive trajectory when they stop talking about all the reasons that are getting in the way. This comes, and the material comes straight from motivational interviewing with adolescents and young adults. It's a great book. That scan code, and I'll show it again at the end, takes you straight to the Amazon page if you'd like to dive into it, or you can get it from other places. Today's on Change Talk. I'll probably post the other videos, but I do have a 3-hour presentation, and I'll get that video out there, where I had to put all this together. But today is just focused on change talk. Whoops, too far. All right. So change talk. What is that? It is motivational statements, intentions to change, disadvantages of the status quo, advantages of change, and the optimism about change. And so we are striving to get young people to make these kind of statements, intentions, talking about why what they're doing right now is disadvantageous to them, those kind of things. And then finally, bringing up some optimism of change. And so the first step is really recognizing what is change talk. And I think people miss that once in a while, and then reinforcing it. And so, like, they may say something, they don't think of it as change talk, but you can really reinforce that and then elaborate it and actually help a young person move towards change. All of this, and this image is straight from the book, is you got to start with that spirit of foundation of partnership, that I can't change you, but I'm a partner with you. I'm guiding you. We really want to emphasize autonomy, that they need to be able to do this themselves. And then we're working on change talk today. All right. So helping clients with change talk. Interestingly enough, we do learn what we believe by hearing ourselves speak it out loud. There are so many things like, and maybe this is a CBT thing, but as people, we kind of think we can think ourselves into things. But you want to test that. Think about trying to teach somebody how to ride a bike or how to learn a bike. You can talk it to death, you can think about it, but literally until you get on the bike and try it, you don't know how to ride a bike. And so we actually learn by doing, and a young person saying something actually can move them forward. It's incredible how that does work. So the more we can get clients to talk about why they want to change, the more likely they will buy into making the change. All right. So I do want to hit on the corner. You'll see it in a lot of them, but that the spirit, that foundational piece is partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. And so there's a lot on that, but it's like, how am I going to do this in partner? How am I going to accept the person in front of me with who they are? How am I going to show compassion? And how am I going to evoke change out of them? All right. So what is preparatory? That's a fun word. All right. How do we know when a young person might be getting ready to change? And again, you need that spirit, because you can shut this down just as easily as you can support it and flourish it and maybe make it more and more. But DARN is a great acronym to remember what you're looking for. So if a young person talks about desire to do something, affirm, reason, using reason, or if they're showing they're talking about needs, all of those are kind of prepping themselves for change. All right. So desire includes words like want, wish, like. Sounds like, I want to stop smoking. You don't know how hard it is. I wish I could lose some weight to be thin like everyone else. Or I would like to follow my parents' rules so they wouldn't nag so much. And obviously this is coming from a young person who's not doing any of these things. That's why it's preparatory talk, not actual change talk. Affirming is can, could, able. I can take my medicine on my own without my parents reminding me all the time. I have a 9-year-old, and there's many things that they don't seem to be doing, but they will sometimes yell at me that I can do that. And so them saying it doesn't actually mean it happens. So we got to keep working on what that next step is. I could cut back on weed if I wanted to. I might be able to cut back on sweets on weekends. All of these are just preps, reasons. All right. I really don't want to end up on dialysis. I was chatting with somebody earlier, but that's an example they use in here. And if you read the book, they actually follow a young person, and they give some really nice scenarios of young people that they've worked with and how this applies to different scenarios. And each chapter actually applies that chapter's learning to different populations, those populations that they're highlighting. So, reason. If I get another dirty UA, they'll kick me out of this place. So that's a young person who is actually like, if you look at that in the opposite, it's like, oh, they actually want to stay in this place. Now I have something I can help them towards. Need includes the words have to, must, important, and clearly they are not, in this phase, they're not stating the specific reasons, and that's where you can elaborate and help and move towards. But I need to lose some serious weight. I've got to get my blood sugar totally down from where it is. And so those are these just, they're not always connected to rationality or reason or even humanly possible immediately, but they are clearly showing some prepping to wanting to change kind of talk. All right. And so this is motivational interviewing uses this 1 to 10 scale on a regular basis, when you're asking about change or following up or asking questions, and you'll see it in some examples a little bit. And there is the language of prep or mobilizing. Mobilizing is commitment. Where on 1 to 10 are you? Activation. And then are they actually taking steps that they can talk about? So the MI ruler, on a scale of 1, not important at all, to 10, very important. How important is this to you? These are great questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, not confident, or 1, not confident at all, to very confident. How confident are you about implementing these strategies? Or on a scale of 1, not ready at all, to 10, very ready. How ready are you to implement what we've talked about? Again, all these questions are like putting autonomy in there, kind of using you statements, helping the young person take ownership of their own lives. And I like really concrete things. And so if you download the flyer, the handout that says change talk, you'll get these in there also. But, what can I ask that might elicit this? Again, we're open questions. What would you like to work on? Maybe it's not, especially when you're working with teens, maybe it's not what the parents have told you they want to work on. Maybe it's not what the school has told you they want to work on. But what would you like to work on? Again, we're trying to elicit some desires. What do you hope to get out of our time together? And maybe it's, they say flat out nothing, but can you work with that? Affirmation, what are some changes you have made before? How do we get that language of can, could, able, how confident are that you can do this? Pushing towards specific reasons for change. Why would you want to make this change in your life? What are the benefits of making this change when you finally get to a change discussion? How important is it for you to do this? I get to do a bunch of intakes for our program, and I always ask these kind of questions. I start off with, do you know why you're here? What's going on? Okay, so you have some anxiety. How is it interfering with your life? All right, so we're already moving towards them saying, what are the things? Because as soon as they answer that, they've told me something that's important to them. And so I have one of their values and maybe even some of their strengths coming out. Need. Why is this something you need to do? What is the best thing that could happen if you made a change? And then finally, as you move into more of a commitment phase, trying to get the words I will, I tried, those kind of things. What is the first step you would like to take? You will take. What is the one thing you can do in the next week? And that's where, again, this is, thinking about exposure ladders. What's the smallest step I can motivate this young person into doing next? So then we can talk about it and we can move forward from there. I'm going to go through some stuff. I have an activity at the end to really reinforce darn and some other things. But once you know about preparatory talk, as you see them talking about it, what do you do with it? How do you use that to move a young person forward? And their reflections and summaries. Anybody who's learned about motivational interviewing on the adult side, like there's this ORS statement of open-ended questions, affirmations, and right down the line. And we got a whole page. If you like that, there's a worksheet on the web page you can also get. But kind of getting down to it, with young adults and teenagers, it's like, what are simple reflections? You're not adding anything to it. You're literally just repeating. So to make sure they even heard themselves say something, make sure you said it. And then there's complex reflections. Okay, so this is, seeing what their true meaning is, because a young person is going to say something and just it's from the heart, it's from the sleeve, wherever it is, it may not have moved into like a conscious way they think about themselves. And a complex reflection is like, everything I know about you, this is what I understand that statement to mean. All right. So I love this phrase, and this came straight from the book. All right. So the next phrase, but right off the bat, a reflection of the person's true meaning expresses the implication of the person's statement. This is the statement I love. It sometimes feels as if you are continuing the paragraph your client has started. Frequently, like with teenagers, I believe them when they say, I don't know. They don't have words to put things into language. And so we regularly in our program have young people say, one of the best thing I got was language that I can talk to my school counselors, my parents, others about how I'm struggling. And so I love this, that a young person might say something and then your complex reflection is going to continue that paragraph. All right. And again, you're doing it, if you've been in any others, kind of maybe in an ask, tell, ask. So you're checking, can I rephrase that? Can I paraphrase that for you? So what, and then say it and then add a little bit of something. So tell them something, maybe even true, what's true, what you think is true about themselves. And then ask, is that right? Is that close? I have found that regularly a young person will, they'll correct me if I'm way off base, but usually it's just a matter of degrees. It's not like I'm way off. And then they're honing me in, gets me change talk, gets me parts of those darn things that I get to then use as we move forward and use their language, which is really helpful. Double-sided reflections emphasize the ambivalence. All right. So that's a big part of motivational interviewing. And so what we're looking to do is, they've told me they value something, and that's why we're doing this, but then they're still saying things on the other side of it. So double-sided reflections emphasize both sides of the young person's mixed feelings about change and points out the discrepancy with their values. It's very helpful to know their values, to be able to do that, find out more about their values. So again, reflections and summaries piece together what they've been saying to you with their desire for change. There's lots of repetition needed. One of the tips, and I'll hit on them a little bit more later, is like probably should be two reflections for every question you're going to ask them. So lots of repetition. And we're not always focused on the negative piece. Can you hear, even from a negative statement, what they do care about, even if it's in the opposite, if they're stating it in the opposite. So example, you've shared how you long to have friendships and described feeling isolated. You also have talked about how you do not want to initiate contact with peers and wish friendships just automatically occurred after introducing your name. I wonder what you're needing to take that first step towards reaching out to them. Can you see that so double-sided, you've shown their ambivalence, how it reflects their values that they've shared with you. And then you've moved forward just a step. What's that next step? What can we do there? Open-ended questions. If you're doing anything in the counseling realm, or you should know about open-ended questions, but it's interesting how often, even as a counselor, I don't use those maybe all the time. And so take the client to deeper than a surface level, allows them to explore their internal experience in a safe, and enables clients to speak more about their story, their internal narrative. You really want to ensure they can't answer with a yes or no, or really limited. So you're also trying to engage their minds, get them to think. Great use during intake or to gather. And again, when I'm doing an intake, I'm asking big questions like, how does this impact you? You know, tell me about areas of your life. What would you like to see happen? Those kind of things. All right. And so just tips for reinforcing change talk. All right. Don't ever forget to support autonomy. All right. So you're really sticking with that, that they are an autonomous unit away from their parents, away from you. Avoid turning reflections into questions. Combine that with don't drop the stems. You know, teenagers do not want to feel like they're in therapy. If you can somehow do therapy without them feeling like they're in therapy, they'll actually be happy about the process because they do want to grow. It's part of the just the developmental stage they're in. But if if you're using clinical terms like it sounds like, or there's just lots of those that are just kind of cues. But get rid of those, and then don't turn it into a question. It sounds like yada yada yada. Oh, and so raising your voice at the end. So don't turn them into questions. Just be confident that you're reflecting them and have built that you're in the spirit of partnership and acceptance and compassion. If they believe those things, they'll correct you if you're wrong. But if you state it as a question, then they're back to a yes or a no. If you state it and you act like it's true, if they're talking with you, you'll get to know it's true because they're not disagreeing with you. Use the word you all the time as much as you can. Affirm values and strengths early. So when you're early working with a young person, like you don't have a lot, you don't want to affirm like that they're still smoking or any of the other negative things, but you can affirm their values, their strengths. And then, as it moves and they start shifting, you can affirm their change talk. I know we say use open-ended questions, but sometimes those are too big for young people. So you can even do a reflection or maybe an ask, tell, ask kind of thing by asking multiple choice questions. You're giving them an option, and they may not even know there's a range of things they could do there. So multiple choice questions are good. And then as we did talk about last month, leave that option, or what do you think? And they might give you a completely different option. So tailor questions with what you already know. Teens very much appreciate if you can remember from 2 sessions back and bring it up. It's like you actually listened to me, and they notice those kind of things. And so if you've ever heard it, can you use it when you're asking them a question? Like, I know you played field hockey last year, even though that's not what we're talking. So clearly you valued, some strength training or some exercise or those kind of things. And so now some of what you're doing, like smoking, may not. So again, tailor it with what you already know. Sometimes you just want to try an activity to get some of these values or those reflections. And some of those might be, and I put them on the web page, but there's a value sorting tool that we use. There's a strengths finder, so it lets them go through and read and like, oh yeah, I do that. And it gives them a name for it, that kind of thing. So that might be an activity you might be willing to try. And again, we've got an activity in a second, but I want to kind of get through the material. But when you're ready, when it feels like they're saying this often enough, again, it's another thing. Don't move too fast to a change plan with a young person. So if you can get them to say, "Oh, how would I do that?" Man, you're so far ahead of saying, instead of saying, "You need to do this." But start the discussion based on what do they want to change. Try to get specific, the more concrete. So what does that change look like for them? Like, how would they like the world to be? What are they willing to change? How can they make these changes? Do they need anything specific to start? How will they know when they have reached that change? So what does that look like so they can evaluate? You're also teaching them to really, in my language, the discoverer skills. How do they track? Because they're not really good at that whole Like try it, track it, and then decide if they should keep it part of their life. So, because most of the time they're just running on this is what I do. I'm just really right here and present. But they don't think about how would they know if this is something they want to keep and add to their life. Okay. Want to do an activity, and you can either write them down on your own, or you can throw them into the chat so I can share them. But we're going to practice thinking through what darn might sound like. So for each type of change, and we're going to go through desire, affirm, reason, and need, consider the example. There's going to be an example each time. And then think about your own. And we'll go through it. We'll try and do elicit and how to reinforce it in the chat, so we all know we're hitting on the same one. And it's not like there's going to be overlap, but practice to expand your repertoire. All right. So desire change sounds like, I want to get off probation. How to elicit it. How do you move a young person towards that? Why would you even want to avoid some of these friends right now? And then how would you reinforce it? Avoiding friends will help you get off probation. All right, so throw your responses into the chat to sounds like I tried to talk to my boyfriend about condoms. So how would you elicit that in your own words? If you'd rather be a verbal person, I'm okay with that too. You can turn your mic off and share. But I am going to give everybody a minute to think about how would they elicit it and how would they reinforce it. Because all of this can sound really neat. If you don't actually try it, it won't change how you talk with young people. Anybody got anything for me yet?
Jason, sorry, this is a new format for me. I can't figure out where the chat is. Is it? Is it
Down,
the in-call messages?
It looks
is that what
like
I'm using?
Huh? So
Would
there
it be
should be.
in-call?
It says chat with everyone. Sorry.
Oh.
Yes, it would say in-call messages at the top.
Okay.
But it's the little, it looks like a comic book where you'd write notes in that somebody was saying pow or something like that down at the bottom.
Okay, thank you. I was going to try to type it in, but I was trying to. It's like, I don't know where to put it. Okay.
Appreciate that.
Let me think about this. Yeah.
There you go. So James throws in there. Can you? Okay. That's a fair question. It's a tough. So he's asking, how did we get to elicit it? All right. So how would we elicit a change like this? So they've kind of got these in the wrong order. So they're giving you the statement you might hear from a young person, but how did you get there? So why would you even want to avoid some of these friends right now? Kind of an open-ended question. And then if they're going to share desire change talk, they might say, I want to get off of permission. I want to get off of probation. And then how to reinforce that if they were to say it. So what I hear you saying is that avoiding these friends will help you get off of probation. And so that's a real simple reinforcement, but you are, and actually I just did that as a question, so I failed on my own. But so avoiding these friends will help you get off probation. And then you get a yes or a no, or you might get counter change talk because these friends are really important, or you might get, oh yeah, I want to get off of probation. So it's one of those things where you want to get a young person to say something that sounds like, I want to get off probation. And you could elicit that through, why would you even want to avoid some of these friends right now? James, I'm hoping that helped again. So in the next one, in my example, and if you pull because I put their worksheet into the chat, it's completely blank. They want you to come up with the, it sounds like, but so we're trying to get a young person to say, I tried to talk to my boyfriend about condoms. What would be a phrase to elicit that? And Rosa threw one in. How are you trying to protect yourself while being sexually active? There you go. So to elicit the condom conversation, you could ask, if you're in a serious relationship, is birth control an open topic you might be considering? Yeah. I think I threw it in my conclusion, but at the end of the day, you also can't, to be in the spirit of MI, you can't just use stuff that doesn't sound like you. So at the end of the day, if I've talked to a teen in any way, shape, or form, they're knowing I'm not bringing up medical terms or formal terminology. And so if I throw in a question, it's just like, they know that's not me. So part of this is also, and why we do these activities, is to try and get you to be able to do this from your own style and not, because there is no perfect way to do this. So appreciate that. I'm going to move forward. Hopefully some of the rest of you are thinking about that. So let's think about ability. It's affirm or ability. I think I like ability better. Sounds like I could quit anytime. All right. So they're telling you they have the ability. And how would I elicit that? Tell me, what would it take for you to feel like you could quit? All right. I could quit anytime. Okay. So you really have the skills to quit now if you choose. And again, you're reinforcing that they are saying, I could quit anytime. And so in this one, we're trying to elicit a young person, probably struggling with weight. I might be able to cut back on sweets on the weekends. How would you go about eliciting that? And Christine, what are some ways you might be able to start working on losing weight? Yeah. What would be the first step you are willing to take to cut back on sugar? Yeah, if we're dealing with a diabetes case, it may be, I kind of like that one. Again, in at the end, I'm going to summarize and tell you kind of direct questions are also helpful instead of just always beating around the bush. Sounds like you are committed to making a change. What would be your first step? I might be able to cut back on sweets on the weekends. Yeah. Good use of you by everybody so far. What does cutting back on sweets look like to you? There we go. We're reinforcing that. We're reinforcing that right into a change plan, right? You're getting specifics. And I will say once in a while you might jump to there and they'll let you know if they're not ready to go there yet. And so then you kind of step back and you affirm and you stop, drop, and roll, which is kind of one of the things you do to counter when there's counter change talk. So excellent. I'm going to keep moving us forward here. So reason. Sounds like I don't want to end up with diabetes and being stuck in a wheelchair like my grandma. How would you elicit that kind of statement for them to give you a reason? Really specifically, what are some reasons you might want to lose weight? And how to reinforce it. So you have personally seen some bad things that can happen, and you don't want that to be you. All right. So this one, I didn't know Rosa would be joining us, but was it Rosa? One of you actually works on dialysis things. So write your response. Sounds like I really don't want to end up on dialysis. All right. How do you elicit that? What are some concerns you have regarding your health? Yeah, that's a great question. I really don't want to end up on dialysis. Yeah. What step can you take to make that happen? You know, why don't you want to end up on dialysis? Because you probably already know they're heading that direction. This is one of those where maybe you even had to share that information with them, test results or something like that. I appreciate you guys really putting some answers down. This is like I tried to do this exercise as I was putting this talk together, and it was like hard looking at, my God, what do I put there? Because once you practice it a little bit, it comes naturally when a young person says it. But I do think this is it's another thing. It's not, motivational interviewing isn't just person centered, like that we're just going whatever direction they lead us in that day. I mean, if you're working with this young person, you probably have a goal of them not ending up on dialysis. That is a direction. You're not just direction list. But you're also working with them in partnership to get there and help them understand why that's not a good idea. All right, let's jump into the last one of these. Need change talk sounds like I need to stop going to the emergency room because of this asthma. What if they start charging me when I'm over 18? How to elicit it. We showed that scale earlier on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I don't need to quit smoking at all, and 10 is I need to quit ASAP. Where are you at? Why did you pick that number and not a lower number? Excuse me. How to reinforce it. You really need to quit so you can reduce the risk of big medical bills messing up your future. Again, they're looking at that. I really like scales. We actually have young people answer a lot of questions in their check-in sheet on scales of 1 to 10. You know, what's your suicidal ideation right now? and I have just been in awe because it's not like there's a scale for that, or if we ever give them a scale for that. They kind of instinctually give us a number. And as they get better, you can literally watch that number drop over the 5 weeks they're in the program. And so I think this 1 to 10 scale, getting them to think. And another fun question is percentage. What percentage do you think you listened today? It's 42%. They give you numbers. They come up with stuff if you ask good questions. All right. So sounds like I must lose some serious weight. How do you define serious weight? Is it a number, clothing size, etc.? Yeah. And if they've already said anything about serious weight, you're reflecting their own language to them. And you're helping them clarify what they mean instead of leaving it so vague that it's just a big wide number. I'm going to keep us moving a little bit. If anybody has any more of those, again, the exercise is on the website if you wanted to work with it and their examples. They make darn a nice example, but it's not even when you read the chapter, there's kind of a lot of different options. It's a really good chapter. It's a lot longer than I could cover in an hour, but don't try to memorize the types of change. You really want to just focus on recognizing anything a young person says that fits into change language, and then automatically start reinforcing with reflections or elaborating, taking them to the next step, which many of you already did in your examples. Again, I shared this early, use strategies that fit your style and direct questions to elicit desire, ability, reasons, and need. Even going down this path, you regularly, and we know this even on a young person that's getting better, there's sometimes where it gets worse. And so watch for bumps in the road. Did they just have a good time, getting high at a party, and now they're back to wanting that lifestyle? So counter change talk and discord can come up anytime. You feel like you've been moving and something changes, or they're having a really bad day, and then you may have to step back. You might have thought, well, I'm going to build a change plan, and they come in on a bad day. So you got to watch for those things. And you got to maintain that motivational interviewing spirit. It's always necessary, so that the elicitation and reinforcement of change talk should be within a foundation of pace, partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. So I want to see if anybody, and I'd always meant for these to be to some extent a little bit of a consulting group also, or to get specific with them. So if anybody has any questions, I would love to hear them. Does anybody have any questions? I will say Melissa's tracked and will send out a certificate. You can get to all these resources. I like this quote too. The art of becoming a skilled motivation interviewer involves a learning process, much akin to becoming proficient in any complex musical instrument or sport, or learning to dance. So find a partner in the process. That's a fair question. If I can't seem to find time to read the full book on on MI? What's the most efficient ways to learn it, in your opinion? It kind of depends on how you learn best. I sometimes force myself into a position and like commit to, in this case, I supervised some interns and I said they had to read it and I had to be prepared to read a chapter, but we only did a chapter a week. So it allowed us to talk to it and apply it to our work. I think finding a partner to work with is a good way to do it. And I think that's one. Even using it and maybe, again, pulling these slides, and I'll get them posted, is just to go through the slides and just maybe print out one of the lists and read it a couple times. I mean, they give you a ton more material in there, but I've put 3 worksheets onto the page, and I will show them up. The front of each of the pages just gives you an overview, and the back, you can't read that at all, but it just covers one thing. So like most of today's talk is on the Change Talk worksheet. And so I honestly think if you were to just pull like this sheet on motivational interviewing spirit and say for the next 3 weeks, and that's a Stephen Covey concept, I'm just going to work on the spirit, man. Am I making this young person feel like they're in partnership? And so I think doing that, I think then Kelly asked, a good way to self-assess on using these things is pay attention. If you're interacting with quite frankly, anyone, if you're interacting with people and you're trying to change to a more partnership talking and asking open-ended questions, you will start noticing how people respond to you. So I would look at how people responded, and I can remember way back, I've always loved babies, always loved kids, and babies always, and I didn't really know the research on that, what they could see and those kind of things at this point in my life, but they always reacted well and I always got good attention. And then I don't know, for 6 months I tried contacts and I have to use really weird contacts. And I literally could tell a difference in how babies and infants responded to me when I had contacts and not my glasses. And then, and so I went back to my and then I read the literature that says, the glasses kind of make it a bigger eye. It's easier to see, like there are developmental, like literally biological reasons that kids responded to it. But I was just paying attention enough to how, and got to interact with infants and babies enough to notice those changes. So that's what I would say is that, I'm just going to practice open-ended questions today, both in work and at home and with people on the street. I try not to do that because I end up in conversations, but every once in a while I do it with a waitress or something. And you ask an open-ended question, you're going to get answers and you're going to start having discussions, and then you can practice reflecting. So I think the first point is to recognize it, and then just practice a small piece on a regular basis. And so that's why I would go back to James, pick a small piece, practice it regularly, try to evaluate, how are most people respond okay to me, but when I start reflecting and answering, do I get deeper, longer conversations? Do I get more response? Those kind of things. In practice, am I moving young people to change without feeling stuck? I think that's the biggest benefit of motivational interviewing, is that you don't have to feel stuck because you're reflecting and elaborating and you're listening, those kind of things. Those are great questions. There is this book again. Again, it's pretty easy to find on Amazon or Guilford, or I think I bought my version from one of the like mental health presses because I could also get a PDF version of it at the time, which I've taken to liking to use those. I run an adolescent IOP, so if there's ever any need for more intensive services, we do it in partnership, even at the level of with clinicians. We try to share. We're not looking to get individual clients. We're looking to give a lot of skills to a young person. I will be doing, this is a great conference. If you haven't heard about it, you could pick up, I don't know, 15 to 20 CEUs in 2 days or a day and a half. It's at the Johnson County Community College. You can register right there. I think it's still $50 to register and then $20 if you actually want the CEUs. I will be giving a 1 hour overview of MI there. So a lot less detail, a lot less practice than I would be here. I think that's just a great conference if you get the chance. These are what I use in my practice to improve working with teenagers. So unless there's any questions, I legitimately feel like I nailed my time. It's like 12:57. Appreciate you all joining me. I am, and Jane, I will make sure if I do something more on this. I just had a request this morning to do a full, maybe a 3-hour training on motivational interviewing out in Independence, or at least Summit at some time in the future. If I do, I will let this audience know that I'm going to be giving a more in-depth training at some point in time. All right. Thank you all very much.